New tonight at 10 o'clock, another teen is shot in Shreveport. 2 teens have been charged in the death of a 19-year-old back in February. A 16-year-old is arrested in Bossier City in connection to the fatal shooting.
A 14-year-old juvenile has been booked into the Caddo Juvenile Detention Center for terrorizing.
Police say the victim is a 16-year-old boy.
Michael Pearson is found guilty of second-degree murder. Prosecutors proved that he killed 17-year-old Devin Myers 1 year ago.
Here in Shreveport, we have an abnormally high percentage of our pediatric patients that come to our trauma center with firearm injuries. It's about 3 times the national average for a trauma center that takes care of kids.
Juvenile Services oversees the juvenile probation and the juvenile detention center. And so we oversee all of the children that are housed in our detention center here, and then we manage all of the probation officers who oversee those children who have come through the system that are on probation.
In juvenile probation, we deal with children of all ages. I think the youngest that we have on probation right now is 6, and that's for truancy. So we do deal with elementary school children for truancy, all the way up to age 18.
In terms of juvenile services, it runs the gamut. We're dealing with kids from runaways and truancy, ungovernable, misdemeanors, all the way through murder and attempted murder. But we use detention really only for those more serious charges.
We also provide personnel to the drug court, to the family preservation court, to the IDD or mental health court.
So in the IDD court, that is standing for the Individualized Dispositional Docket. I'm our mental health probation officer, and I'm dealing with children involved in the court system who have serious mental health diagnoses. They can range anything from bipolar disorders, psychotic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and major depressive disorders.
It is highly important that we have a multi-tiered approach to a multi-tiered problem, which is crime.
And we also know that adolescents are not fully cognizant of everything that they do. Their brains are not fully developed. We know the frontal lobe develops last, and that's where judgment and reasoning is, right? So that's why we have parents and grandparents and adults in our lives that are supposed to guide us and help us make good decisions.
That's why we do have the mental health court, because just to treat a crime issue as merely that and not get to the root of it would ultimately fail that family and also fail our responsibility to keep the public safe.
What we try to do is adapt to the crime that we were seeing. So for example, we began to identify in 2012 that we had problems with human trafficking. And so over the span of a few years adapting to that, we started the first human trafficking court in the state, in juvenile courts. And so we hired and trained 2 probation officers that specialize in human trafficking, and then worked with the juvenile judges to open that court to address that problem. That's the history of Caddo Juvenile, is that we try to find the underlying problem. So we had the first juvenile drug court in the state, the first juvenile mental health court in the state, and now the first human trafficking court in the state.
STAR Court program, which is for girls and boys that have been victims of sex trafficking or they're at high risk for being trafficked. And again, 2 specialized probation officers that have had a lot of training in trauma and trafficking and how to work with young people that have experienced that kind of trauma.
And so if the principal purpose of juvenile law is to be rehabilitative, sometimes that requires us dealing with the root of the matter. When we talk about something like our sex trafficking court or STAR court, there are a multitude of issues that go into young people being pulled into that life. And so it becomes important for us to provide opportunities and options for them for life after that.
So in Louisiana, you can be arrested for a criminal charge at the age of 10. So the range is pretty broad.
My unit investigates basically any type of crimes dealing with juveniles or status offenses that deal with juveniles. The status offenses are basically done where they can be either issued a citation for that status offense, and the parents will be responsible for taking over. That's if we hadn't had room in one of the youth facilities, which Johnny Gray Jones, which we're losing. Now, if it's a criminal offense, depending on the severity, they can either be sent to Ware Detention Center, or once again, it's a situation where if there's no room, they have to be released back to the parents.
There are 60,000 children in Caddo Parish. We only have 24 beds in juvenile detention. So the 24 kids, and if we're full, those are serious charges. We're talking about gun violence, rape, armed robbery, second and third burglary.
The fights have led to school expulsions, arrests, and plenty of concern among parents.
12 students are arrested at Southwood High School this afternoon after 2 gang-related fights. A resource officer calls for backup at Green Oaks High School after a fistfight escalates into a family feud.
We used to have a huge number, thousands of children that were arrested for school fights, for example. Of course, fighting school is inappropriate. Fighting as a way of handling conflict is inappropriate. We want to teach the kids that. But like I was saying before, if you bring in a school fight child to detention and you're trying to teach them that lesson, they're meeting kids that are in there for armed robbery and rape and murder. And so while they're learning the lesson we're trying to teach them, they're also learning 10 other negative lessons. We have reduced school-based arrests by 64% since he started, because we found that arresting kids for a school fight and bringing them to detention actually didn't work, had a negative impact. So it helps us reduce the population, it helps us address the more serious kids, the kids that are coming in on rape and armed robbery. We now have more time to address their serious problems. And we're more effective with the school fight kids.
Juveniles are housed here in the detention center pre-trial. So essentially that means from the time of an arrest, unless they are released back to their parent or whether on a monitor or a guardian or some other way, they will remain in our facility unless they're granted bail of some form as well.
When a child comes on probation, they are adjudicated either for committing a crime or delinquent act, being ungovernable, or for truancy. And they come before a judge and they are given a disposition, which is similar to sentencing in adult court.
The average stay for a juvenile offender in our detention center is 10 days. Now there are times, of course, where we have children who have been adjudicated and placed into state's custody, and they still may remain in our facility longer pending placement in either a secure care facility or wherever the Office of Juvenile Justice may send them next.
My responsibility as the manager of the Caddo Parish Juvenile Detention Center is to ensure safety and security of our staff, residents, as well as the facility. And also just to make sure that the needs of those juveniles are taken care of. The way a child is processed or even brought into the Caddo Parish Juvenile Detention Center will be through our juvenile court system or local law enforcement, bringing them to charge them with a particular charge.
We do not call our children who are incarcerated inmates. We refer to them as residents. So there are a number of things about juvenile law that are different.
We make contact with their parents, of course. We do that to ensure that they know that their child has been arrested and is actually in the facility. We allow their kid to talk with their parent, just briefly. We do a clothing exchange where we get their actual street clothes that they have, and we provide them with a uniform that they will actually put on and have on until they are released from our facility.
Each child is in an individual cell. Based on the state regulations, we do not double bunk, so a child is in a cell by themselves.
We actually have 3 pods, and we have 2 of our pods that are male dominant, and we have 1 pod that we may house some males and some females there.
PREA, which is also known as the Prison Rape Elimination Act, governs the manner in which we operate the detention center, which is why there is 1 child a cell. Since the implementation of that regulation, assaults, sexual assaults are at 0%. They're at 0% in our facility for a reason. That's not the same instance necessarily in a facility that does not operate in that manner.
We use whatever tools that's necessary to make sure that we house the kids in the appropriate housing unit. And that's another part of keeping them safe and secure.
They are in many ways safer in our facility than perhaps in some of the situations that some of them have come out of because of threats of violence or other things that they may have encountered. We have a staff here that cares for them, cares for their nutritional needs. So we have a full-time staff that's serving them. They receive 3 meals a day. We have a mental health counselor who meets with children to address their concerns. We have a full-time nurse that is here on staff, so they do receive some level of medical care. We have a staff of teachers who are here providing educational enrichment. The kids go to class here. They are not just idly sitting in cells. They are receiving academic enrichment. They are many times catching up to things that perhaps they weren't doing, because sometimes we have the instances of children who have been brought into the facility and they weren't going to school in the traditional sense anyway.
Mainly I focus on programming, bringing different agencies or outside agencies in to provide different things for them to do. For instance, art therapy. They love that. That comes every Monday. They spend a few hours with the art therapist to just have a little time to just do something different.
Our staff is trained in verbal de-escalation techniques and does not use typical restraints that you might see in adult prisons relative to even when a resident has gotten unruly.
Oftentimes they get responses that they give. So when they yell and they oftentimes hear people yelling at them, that just escalates it. We're trained, and what we do, we approach them at a calm state. I often go in the rooms with them. They just want to be heard. So I'll take them to a different area and let them know, hey, I'm here, let's talk about it. Because all they want to do is be heard half the time.
And so in many ways, a lot of the physical engagement is not the same as they may encounter in other environments. And so for those reasons, they are safer. They are safer because the lack of assault. They are safer because they're cared for by staff. They are safer because they have educational and academic opportunities outside of the scope perhaps in which they have in other settings.
If a child is not getting proper nutrition, if a child is not being nurtured and loved and guided and taught right from wrong, it's going to affect their behavior.
In the 12 years that I defended kids in juvenile court as an attorney, I worked with 2 biological dads. So this world is single moms. But the misconception that these moms don't love their kids or don't care is wrong. The moms that I work with are, unfortunately, because of poverty, they're working 2 low-paying jobs and they're simply not there. They're not present. Mom is working her second job until 10 p.m., so the kid comes home at 3. There's no homework help, there's no reading help, there's not a healthy supper. Because mom is at the second job. It's not that she doesn't care.
Ultimately, our goal is to not only rehabilitate that child, but perhaps help the family and the environment from which that child arose and chart them on a different path.